Howdy folks, my name's Austin, I'm with Toyco Industries, and today we're going to be going over the vacuum system on a typical service truck in the portable toilet industry. So in this presentation, I'm going to be talking about the parts and components that are involved in making a vacuum system function, what each component does specifically, and how to maintain it and how to choose the correct part. So I'm going to start off with the vacuum pump. I'm going to be real brief on the vacuum pump because that's an hour-long video in and of itself. What you need to know about the vacuum pump is the only job it has is to move air. It doesn't move waste. It doesn't move any water through the system. The cleaner the air, the better. Uh, the the key takeaways on the vacuum pump as far as how it works is it uses these Kevlar vanes. This specifically is a Massport pump, but all of them are the same. All rotary vane pumps use Kevlar vanes, and they expand at the bottom, they collapse at the top. So as it rotates, it creates an air pocket there. It sucks air in, and as they squeeze again, it pushes air out. We're going to be talking about how to keep this clean because that's what longevity means for this pump is just keeping it clean. The cleaner you can keep it, the longer it's going to last. So we want those to just keep extending and retracting. That's what we're going to be discussing today. So the first on the list at the very top of your tank is the primary filter. It's commonly called a primary shutoff, and that's because it's actually not much of a filter at all. Its job is to stop water from getting into your system in the event of an overflow or wastewater or what have you. How it works is there'll be air flowing, it'll be going through, and if waste levels get too high, this ball is going to float up into that rubber stop, and it's going to stop the airflow, and it'll deadhead your pump. And in this case, deadheading your pump is okay because you don't want sewage to go through the whole system. It got brought up in Reno. Well, how do you service this thing? It's not as much of a service as it is you're just checking on things and making sure it's still there. Yes, you'll get some debris inside there that might restrict a little bit of airflow, things like toilet paper or leaves or whatever. But you want to check it because this one's steel, and even if they're aluminum, a lot of times this stuff it'll rot completely away due to rust and corrosion. And then in that case, you're left with just a manway. It's nothing more than a manway. Because the ball mechanism, the shutoff mechanism, is destroyed. You're also going to want to try and paint these. Painting it will help prevent or at least slow down the corrosion and rust. It'll keep it alive longer. So check on that every once in a while. Next up, it's a secondary filter. So the secondary filter comes in a vast variety of shapes, sizes, CFM ratings, materials. They all do the same job. The job is to separate the water from the air. It does this by pulling air in. It goes through a series of baffles and tubes, and then it pulls it back out. And then it's able to separate that water from the air. Because again, we're just trying to protect that vacuum pump. The bigger, and almost in all cases, the bigger it is, the better, just because it has more time to work. It'll have more time to separate that water from air, and it'll just really do a better job. Depending on the CFM rating, it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and that's because air is moving so fast that if it's moving, the faster it's moving, the less time it has to work that water from the air. So you'll see them in this case. This is a 1-inch primary shutoff with a ball inside of it. Not much CFM, so it has a lot longer time. Versus if you put that HXL 400 on there that we just saw, first of all, it's going to restrict the airflow a lot. So even though the vacuum pump is rated for that CFM, You're not going to get that because this is a major obstruction. It's also not going to do its job at all because it's moving so fast. It's going in one side, out straight through the other. It's not having time to work through the bottom. But yeah, CFM rating. Make sure you check that with the manufacturer or us when you call, and we'll make sure we get it right. This is the final filter, or the inlet filter, and the way to think about this filter is to think about it as the air filter on your car. So its job is to filter out the fine stuff, not water, but debris. So like chunks of rust, toilet paper, leaves again. It'll separate that, and there'll be a canister. A lot of times, especially nowadays, it's usually located on the head of the pump, the intake manifold of the pump, or anywhere between the secondary and the vacuum pump. So these need to be serviced and checked. This is a actual picture that a customer had sent to me. He wasn't getting any vacuum in his system. The tank was empty. The secondary was drained. Oil catch was drained. He flushed the pump. Still no vacuum. All right, send me a picture of your pump. Send me a picture of the whole system. Well, I noticed that there's this primary filter there, and a lot of trucks don't have this. This one wasn't located on the vacuum pump, but it was along the chain. So he opens that up. This is the picture that I got. As you can see, this is covered with rust, dirt, dust, all sorts of stuff. And it was a major restriction in his vacuum system. So he wasn't able to build any vacuum in his tank. In this case, it's best to just replace it. But if you maintain it, you can go ahead and just clean that off. If it's a mesh filter, if it's a paper filter, you can just replace it, and they're cheap. But if it's just a steel mesh filter, you can just clean it off, put it back in, use it just like you always do. But this is something that needs to be serviced a lot. Again, with the CFM rating, it needs to be adequate for your vacuum pump. This will drastically improve the life of your vacuum pump, guys. This is the difference between a 5-year pump and a 20-year pump. They're relatively cheap considering the price of a vacuum pump, or even a rebuild kit for that matter. Definitely worth having. Next is your oil catch muffler. So your oil catch muffler is located after your vacuum pump, and its job is similar to the secondary, except rather than separating air from water, it's separating oil from water. And there's not much to these. This is where you're going to notice if the CFM rating is adequate, because if it's not going to have time to work that oil, and you're going to get a huge bath of oil right down the side of your truck. You'll fire up your vacuum pump, turn it in vacuum, and it'll blast oil all down the side of your truck. It'll make a big mess. And if it doesn't, it's going to restrict your vacuum pump, and you're going to build up a lot of heat, which in turn is going to shorten the life of your vacuum pump, and you won't create as much vacuum because of that heat buildup. So you want to make sure that that's big. You want to drain it daily. And another thing, it's pretty common for people that build their own trucks, and I've even seen manufacturers build trucks, and you'll have your vacuum pump here, and your oil catch will be way up here because it's easy to reach a handle to drain it. Well, that's not necessarily a good idea because as oil's heavy, as I'm sure most of you know, as your vacuum pump's spitting out that oil, it has to travel up all that plumbing and then go to the oil catch. Well, what'll happen if it's too long? That oil will try and climb, and then it'll pull up and drain straight back into your vacuum pump. It'll just be spitting oil, and it never gets to the oil catch muffler. So you'll get a lot of sludge. You get a lot of sludge in your vacuum pump. It'll restrict it, and it'll also cause those vanes to stick. If you have stuck vanes, your vacuum pump doesn't work. So if you can, and most scenarios, especially if it's a frame-mounted package and it's driven off of a PTO, you're not going to be able to necessarily have your oil catch below your vacuum pump. A lot of times, best case scenario is just directly to the side of your vacuum pump. But the lower that is, the better. because it doesn't have to fight gravity clearing out of that vacuum pump. So now let's talk about vacuum and understanding vacuum. Obviously, vacuum is the absence of air. Here's how I want you to think of vacuum. So to think of vacuum, you have to think of pressure. You can always put more air inside of your tank until it explodes. You can put 100 psi in there, or 1,000 psi, and you could even put 1,000,000 psi inside that tank if it would hold it. However, with vacuum, you can't take out what's already gone. You can't take out more air than is air. You can only take out so much air. So it's limited. And your vacuum, maximum vacuum, is going to depend on your elevation. So at sea level, most vacuum pumps, you're going to get anywhere from 22 to 24 inches of mercury, as is expressed. So 22 to 24 basically comes down to heat buildup. That's a continuous vacuum rating. So the 22 inches of mercury is going to come from your air-cooled pumps. These are pumps without a fan or without coolant running through them, and they get hot. So that's going to limit your vacuum. Rule of thumb, about every 1,000 feet you go up, you're going to lose an inch of mercury. Atmospheric conditions can also affect how much vacuum you have. So keep that in mind. You're going to need to calibrate your vacuum pump as well, or your instruments rather. You're going to need to calibrate your vacuum instruments so you can see that this vacuum gauge isn't actually reading 0, which is common. When you get it, they won't. What you'll need to do is you'll take out that plug, and then that needle is going to go to 0. That's how you calibrate your vacuum gauge to know what you're actually getting. So let's talk about how to choose the correct vacuum pump. As I had briefly discussed earlier, you're going to need to know what your vacuum pump's going to be doing, whether it be septic or portable toilet stuff, what the duty cycle is going to be. We're talking about, are we going to be pumping toilets where we might be running it for 10, 20 minutes? Or are we going to be pumping septic tanks where if it's a big tank and you got to connect a lot of hose, it could be running for 30, 45 minutes. I've seen cases where it's 3 hours if there's a lot of head in the hose. And also the size of hose is going to play a role. So with septic trucks and grease trap pumps, you're going to want a liquid cooled or a fan cooled vacuum pump to help keep it cool, and it's also going to give you that extra couple inches of mercury that we had discussed earlier. It's just going to do a better job, and your pump's going to last a lot longer if it can shed off that heat. It's more expensive up front, but you're really saving money down the line because you won't have to mess with it. So the formula is, in order to attain full vacuum in 30 seconds, the formula is the gallonage of the tank, divide that by 7.5, and that's going to give you how many CFMs, cubic feet per minute, your tank will require to achieve full vacuum in 30 seconds, because there's a lot of different options. There's vacuum pumps that are from 30 CFM all the way up to 800 CFM. And this is how you kind of determine what vacuum pump you want to run. Small tanks are going to be an exception. Your 500 gallon tanks or 600 gallon tanks, they're going to be kind of an exception, because although they can build full vacuum in 30 seconds, you're not going to have a lot of airflow. So where that's going to hurt you is you'll stick your wand in a toilet, you'll be sucking, it'll be going good. Well, you'll pull that wand out and it'll lose its vacuum instantly, and then here we go, we're got to wait longer. Now we're at full vacuum again, I can open up that valve again, now we're rocking and rolling. More CFM in that case is acceptable. So that's how we calculate the size of the vacuum pump that's needed. Now let's talk about how to adjust the vacuum relief valve. As we discussed earlier, it's going to depend on your elevation. There's certain charts that I can email over to you if you're interested. Just give me a call, and I'll be happy to walk you through it and give you the technical way. But the easy way to do it is hold up your vacuum relief valve and see what its maximum vacuum is, and your atmosphere, your elevation. Just see what that vacuum pump can do. It's not going to hurt it to deadhead for a couple seconds. So let's say I'm able to pull 18 inches of vacuum in Utah. From that point, I'm going to adjust my vacuum relief valve to 17 inches, and that just ensures that it breathes. You need a vacuum relief valve because if there's no air flowing through that pump, what you're doing is it's called deadheading. When you deadhead a pump, everything's moving around there, everything's working hard, but there's no way to cool it because nothing's moving. So it's just going to build and build and build heat, and that's going to take out your vacuum pump. That'll drastically reduce the life of your vacuum pump and your vanes, bearings, everything. So you want to make sure air's flowing. Pressure relief valves. Even if your truck has a vacuum only pump, your service truck will still need to be equipped with a pressure relief valve. And here's why. So we have a local customer, and what had happened was he had, at some point in the day, he had pumped out a car wash, and then he went and serviced a donut factory, and somewhere in the mix there was two chemicals in there that did not get along. So he drained the truck, parked it overnight, and that chemical reaction took place, and it built so much pressure that it spewed up some foam that clogged up his vacuum pump, and he didn't have a pressure relief valve. Well, that tank exploded. So that's why it's important to always have a vacuum or a pressure relief valve, just in case something crazy like that happens. It's just necessary to have. Just your pressure relief valve between 3 to 5 psi. Really doesn't take much to get the job done. And those tanks, if you overpressure them, you're essentially creating a bomb. They're built to withstand vacuum, not pressure. All right, so now we'll talk about flushing your vacuum pump. This is how you clear debris and stuff out of your vanes, and it definitely improves the longevity. It'll get rid of some of that sludge that we talked about. You'll be able to kind of restore your vacuum pump if it seems to kind of be wimping out. It's not how it used to be running. This is going to help a lot. And in a lot of cases too, if you have a vane that's stuck, if there was something that got in your vacuum pump that shouldn't have been in there, sludge, whatever, it'll help free your vanes. So how to flush your vacuum pump, and I'll go more in depth on this later in another video, because this is kind of a drawn out process depending on what vacuum pump you have. But the easy way to do it is disconnect your inlet hose. If it's not already equipped with a flushing kit, disconnect your inlet hose, mix a 50-50 ratio of the pump oil that you're using and diesel fuel, and then feed it in about a quarter of a pint, half a pint at a time, and let that work. Let that work through your vacuum pump, and make sure your oil catch is drained, or else it's going to spew everywhere. But just let it work. Bigger vacuum pumps, you can even do like half pint increments. Something that's important to note with this, when you're doing that, it's an easy process. Don't let those vanes sit. Don't dump that in your vacuum pump and then shut it off. What that'll do is, if it sits in fluid, if your vanes are sitting in fluid, well, those vanes are going to absorb your pump oil and that diesel fuel, and those vanes are going to swell, and that's going to make them get stuck inside that rotor. So it'll spin, they'll collapse because they have to, but they're not going to expand, and they'll become stuck. So that's why you're going to run your pump, suck it in, let it clear out, let it run for 5, 10, 15 minutes until your heart's content. Just let it run for a while after, and you'll be fine. All that stuff will be out of there, and it should be clear. When you do this right, when you shut off your vacuum pump, you're going to hear a lot of chattering, like a lot of tick, 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 and that just means that you did the job good. That's exactly what your pump is supposed to do, because what you're hearing is those vanes releasing and they're bouncing into the cylinder, and that's perfectly normal. That's perfectly fine. rebuilding your vacuum pump. I'm not going to be too elaborate on this just because it's such an in-depth process, and there's just a lot to know about it. Here's what I'll say. Um, Make sure you read the owner's manual. Make sure you understand the process and the tolerances and the measurements and where everything needs to be. The biggest thing that I would say, because if you put everything back together the way it was and all you did was clean it out and give it new vanes and bearings maybe, make sure that you're using brass tooling. You're doing this because some of the clearances inside that vacuum pumper might only be a couple thousandths of an inch. So if you hit it with a steel hammer and you make a ding or a nick or anything somewhere, well, it's not going to fit back together correctly. You're going to lose vacuum by doing that, or damage your pump, and it could be rendered useless if you put big dings and nicks and stuff in there. So use brass tooling. Also, this is a photo that a customer had sent me. And these lines that you're seeing right there, those are actually grooves. So use your eyes and make sure everything feels smooth. That cylinder should be smooth. Those grooves, because of that, those vanes aren't going to be able to rest securely against that cylinder wall, so you're not going to get a good seal. Which is how a vacuum pump works. So this is common. This happens with a lot of them. There's a lot of grooves and stuff and ruts. A lot of times you'll see ruts going this way, and that's just air that's going to be able to escape. So your vacuum will start dying off. Sometimes you can take it to a machine shop and they can bore that and it'll be good as new. Other times they can't. So that's just something to keep in mind and pay attention to. So like I said, I'm with Toyco Industries. If you have any questions, you're more than welcome to give me a call, or any of our staff will be happy to help you. And we sell all the parts, all the parts and pieces and everything you saw in this presentation. We sell, and we'll be able to help you out if you have any questions on what CFM rating is, or what's the right pump, or anything like that. Give us a call and we'll help you through the whole process. Thanks for watching. Bye.